How's it going, everybody? My name is Ryan, aka Blackbeard TCG. I hope you guys are all having an amazing day, and if not, maybe I can make it a little bit better. Today, in episode 2 of Road to the Treasure Cup, we will be talking about counters. In the previous episode, we talked about Dawn and why it's important, and in this episode, we'll be going into the individual colors, talk about the counters, what you should look out for both offense and defense, and hopefully you'll be able to implement this strategy into your games as you practice for Treasure Cup and you attend your locals. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing that I want to talk to all of you guys about in terms of counters is my approach to how I view what a counter is. And I follow the principle of a counter is a counter is a counter. And what do I mean by that? You guys have probably heard me say it a couple times. Maybe it's on my live stream or in some of my previous videos. Well, what I mean by that is too often people try to get the optimal counter, and by that I mean they might have 2k counters in hand, and because a 5k is swinging into their leader and their leader's 5k, they're like, oh, you know what, I don't want to use my 2k counter. I'd rather be able to use it more optimally because I only have so many 2k counters. I'm gonna take this hit. In my opinion, that's not the right call. Now, of course, I also want to mention this very early on in the video. Everything depends on game state, right? Nothing I say is a complete blanket statement because it depends on what the game looks like. But one thing that I can say with absolute certainty is that the purpose of a counter is to not take damage. I feel like that was one of the biggest things that I had to learn when I was first learning the game. And that will completely throw out the idea of trying to optimize your counter. Now, of course, does that mean that you blast breath and get plus 4,000 power just to block 5,000 attack to your leader when you're at 5,000? Yeah, no, I'm not talking about that. Of course, if that's going to be lethal and that's the only defensive option you have, you damn well better use it, right? Or else you're going to lose the game. That's why I'm saying you have to analyze the game state. But what I'm saying is, for example, if you're in a situation where you don't want to approach lethal thresholds too early, and say a leader is attacking you for 5,000 and your leader is obviously 5,000, you're not playing Whitebeard, we're talking about set 1, and you have a 2k counter in hand, don't feel like you can't use your 2k counter. Your purpose of countering is to not take damage. If you had a 1k counter, you would not take damage. You have a 2k counter in your hand, you would not take damage, right? That's the purpose of it. Of course, you would like to have it be optimal. Of course, you would like to be able to 2k counter, 2k counter, or 2k counter, 1k counter in order to get over a 7k swing. Of course, we all love to do that. But maybe you have to 2k counter to 2k counter to get over a 7k swing, right? It happens, and it's better than not taking any damage at all. Do not be stingy with your counters when necessary. Again, analyze the situation of the game, depending on game state. Early on, maybe you want to take a hit or two, try to dig for certain cards that you might want. Maybe you're trying to get that Onigashima and whatnot, but maybe not. Maybe you don't want to take those early hits. Maybe you don't want to get into early threshold range for lethal. And if that's the case, then you definitely want to use your counters. So that's the first concept that I want to talk about. Up next, let's talk about knowing all of the 2k counters that your opponent can possibly play and also keeping track of them. Why is it important to keep track of? Well, when we're trying to go for lethal, we want to see if we have the numbers in order to win. And the easiest way to do that is realizing, okay, if their Dawn is fully tapped out, the only way they could stop my attack is with cards in their hand. Most cards will either have no counter, 1k counter, or 2k counter. And the biggest thing to remember is if they use a majority of their 2k counters throughout the match, which, by the way, you can easily confirm just by asking your opponent to look through their trash. And please remember, at any point throughout the game, guys, just politely ask your opponent, hey, can I view your discard pile real quick? Can I view your trash real quick? And they have to show it to you. And then that way you'll be able to determine, okay, they use this many 2k counters. Now I can change how many Dawn I want to attach before I start attacking. Very, very important. So real quick, let's just go over the cards that you're probably going to see in most decks. So for red, you're probably always going to have to worry about 4 Otama being in the deck, no matter what red leader is being played, as well as 4 Sanji. Some people might not run the 4 Sanji and might decide to run the 4 Monkey D. Luffy promo instead. Definitely look out for that, but I can confidently say that every red deck is going to be running 4 Otama. Oh, also, I don't know how I forgot, but Brook. Don't forget about Brook, 2k counter that will definitely see play. Really, really good card. And if you're facing Luffy, he's probably going to be running 4 copies of that as well. Now, for blue, every blue deck is going to be running 4 Alvida and 4 Dracula Mihawk. Mr. 2 Bon Clay is not seeing too much play, which is unfortunate because I actually really like him and I played him in my own deck. You guys seen my deck profile and it paid dividends for me. But every blue deck, be it Crocodile or Doflamingo, is going to be running 4 copies of Dracula Mihawk and 4 copies of Alvida. For green, I mean, I shouldn't even have to say it, but Izo is very, very good on both offense and defense. So you're going to have to go up against 4 copies of that. And then as well, 4 copies of Scratchman and Pooh because it's also searchable. Lastly, for purple, you're going to have to worry about Sasaki, X-Drake, and Ulti. Now, some people aren't running 4 copies of Ulti in their purple builds. For me, I personally do, and I think it's a staple, but you're definitely going to see 4 copies of X-Drake and 4 copies of Sasaki. Now, all of this is important because as you go through the game and you view the trash, you'll be able to make a logical decision when you're going on offense to say how many 2K counters do they have. If they never played any 2K counters throughout the match and you're trying to go for lethal, odds are they might have it. Sure, of course, there's a world where maybe they don't, but odds are they probably will at that point of the game. And remember, of course, things are searchable. Scratchman and Pooh is searchable. Izu's searchable. X-Drake and Ulti and Sasaki aren't searchable, but you can easily draw into them. You have Dracula Mihawk, who can be stacked on the top of the deck with Doflamingo and things of that nature. Sanji can be searched. So at some point, they're going to have 2K counters, and you're going to have to worry about it. So it's very important to just look through the trash, see which ones are used, and then at that point, as you go throughout the game, you can make that logical decision based on the game state, how many Dawn you want to attach. Now, I would like to talk about event counters. Now, event counters are really powerful, and in my opinion, they are the things that you have to look out the most for. Now, thankfully, they are obvious because you have to have active Dawn in order to use them. Now, of course, there's a world where people might fake that they have a counter available, and that might switch up how your opponent plays because, like, you're baiting it, you're leaving that Dawn open, and they're like, is that a Blast Breath? Is that a guard point? I don't know. But in my opinion, that doesn't really work all that well because obviously you're giving up one more Dawn in terms of power for you on offense. Is it really worth taking that bluff? It depends on the game state. Now, right now I want to talk to you guys color by color what events decks are probably going to be playing at Treasure Cup and things that you have to look out for, as well as some tips that you guys can utilize. So let's talk about purple first. In purple, you will always see Blast Breath and Thunder Bagua. I don't know if people are running less than 4 copies of each, but in my opinion, these counters need to be maxed out. They are just too damn good. I think if you're going up against purple, you will always need to look out for these. Blast Breath only requiring 1 Dawn and Thunder Bagua requiring 2 Dawn. So remember, as you go throughout the game, if purple is leaving 1 Dawn open, they probably have a Blast Breath. If they have 2 Dawn open, they probably have a Thunder Bagua. And that's why I always say, if you're going up against purple and you want to make sure you get a guaranteed hit in towards the late game, at least try swinging with 9K as opposed to 7K. And I know a lot of people will always say 7K this, 7K that, but it always depends on the game state. If you swing at 7K and they have 1 Dawn open, you're going to get Blast Breath and your attack's not going to go through. Go to 9K, and of course, they can still Blast Breath, but then now they're going to have to use at least 1 more card in order to fully counter that attack. It all depends on the game state, and you have to be very wary about how much Dawn your opponent has open. Also, remember that Thunder Bagua has a trigger. So in the event that you do hit your opponent and they do get the Thunder Bagua in trigger, they can go ahead and load up 1 Dawn. If they load up 1 Dawn, then they do have access to potential Blast Breath in hand that they might not have had either. So just things to remember. Up next, let's talk about blue. Now, in blue, the events that you're probably going to see are Love Beam and Overheat. It depends on the ratios. Some people like maxing out Love Beam, playing 4 copies. Some people like playing 3. Some people play no Overheat. Some people play a couple copies, depending on if they're playing Crocodile or Doflamingo. It all depends, but these are the ones you're going to have to worry about. Love Beam is really interesting because if a lot more people start adapting to Crocodile technologies that, I've been implementing, then Love Beam now becomes a 1-cost counter that allows you to plus and draw cards, and you can use multiple of them in the turn for a cost of 1. Very, very strong. And then, of course, your opponent will also have Overheat. Now, Overheat's interesting, and what I always recommend to people is make sure that you remember that your opponent has this option. What do I mean by that? Say you're playing red, and you have Zoro on the board. I would always recommend you swing with your Zoro first, because Overheat will be able to bounce an active card back up to your hand. Sure, you could always play that Zoro again, but now you're giving up 3 Dawn. Go ahead, swing with that Zoro first, because Overheat can only bounce active 3 costs or lower, so just remember that in terms of your order of operations when you're trying to decide who you want to attack with first. Next for green, you're probably going to be seeing Paradise Waterfall in addition to Punk Gibson. Now, if people are playing 7 cost heavy kid, then they're probably going to go for the Paradise Waterfall to swing, restand at the end phase, and then of course block with 7 cost kid, and then also restand it with Paradise Waterfall, making it 9k, pretty hard to get over. That's going to be the combo you're going to have to worry about. And then Punk Gibson on the side of 8 cost kid, that's going to be able to rest other threats as well. So when it comes back on the kid's side, then they can go ahead and KO those 4 cost threats. Now, Paradise Waterfall is only a 2k counter, whereas Punk Gibson is a 4k counter. Now, these are things to remember, especially if they have a 7 cost kit on the board. You can expect or try to predict if they do have a Paradise Waterfall, because they'll be able to block and then they'll be able to restand it with the Paradise Waterfall, effectively making him a double blocker. It's something you have to consider, especially when you're going for lethal. Maybe they don't have the Paradise Waterfall and you're just completely fine, but it's something that you have to take into account when you are going up against green. Now, lastly, red. Red is absolutely dangerous because I've said it before in previous videos, red has some amazing counters. First off, let's talk about guard points. For only 1 Dawn, you get 3,000. And why is this so good? It's so good because, again, a lot of people will still just swing 7,000 on pilot, like brain off 7,000 attached to Dawn swing. Well, guard point will now make the red leader 8,000. So, sorry, your attack is countered. Something that you have to remember if your opponent leaves 1 Dawn open. In addition to that, if your opponent leaves 1 Dawn open and they have less than 2 life, you are open up to Frankie Radical Beam. Now remember, this now goes from a 2k counter to a 4k counter for 1 cost. That is like if you have Love Beam and you have Crocodile on board. It is insane value. So you have to be wary of that as well. If your opponent leaves 1 Dawn open, expect a guard point, expect a Radical Beam. Lastly, we need to talk about Redhawk. This card is so good. Okay, so not only do you get a 4k counter, you also get board control with this card. It is so good, but the most scary and sneaky thing about it is its trigger. What does it do? Minus 10k if it gets hit. Let me tell you guys about a scenario that happened to me. So, I was going up against my girlfriend. You guys can see the game state on the screen right now. I took a screenshot of it. I even posted it on Twitter. And basically, very standard play. I have my 10 cost Kaido that I played the previous turn. I had my Onigashima. I now have 7 Dawn. I'm planning on attaching Dawn to my Kaido leader, swinging with that. She'll be left with 1 life. I go ahead and use my Kaido leader effect, get rid of all of my 7 Dawn that I now have, trash that last life, and now I can swing for 12k with my 10 cost Kaido for game. Well, it just so happened I attached that Dawn to my Kaido to try to guarantee the hit. It successfully hit, but guess what that second last life was? It was Redhawk, which meant that she was able to minus 10k on my 12k power Kaido. With no more Dawn left, yeah, 2k is not gonna cut it. Turn passes back over to her, she gets the W. Redhawk saved the game. That's something that you might have to consider. Now, of course, it's not always going to be like that, but that is a scenario that definitely can happen. Redhawk is very, very good on defense, and it has that little bit of offense element of it being able to board control. And everybody, these are the events that you are going to have to look out for when you are facing these decks. Memorize them, know what they do, expect them, try to play around them, and I'm telling you, it will help make your gameplay go a lot smoother. So, with that being said, I believe I covered all of the main points in terms of counters, whether it be the ones in your hand, whether it be the ones in the events, the ones that you could potentially see, whether you're going into locals as we head into Treasure Cup, and the ones that will be played in Treasure Cup. If there's anything that I missed for anybody that's experienced or anybody that has any other input, please, by all means, leave it down in the comment section below. And more importantly, if you guys have any questions at all, also leave that in the comment section below, and myself or any of the other amazing members of the community will comment and reply. And we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Sounds really professional, doesn't it? With that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope that this was helpful. Make sure to like the video, subscribe if you're not, but more importantly, even if you don't subscribe, please just like the video. Obviously, it helps me algorithm-wise, but more importantly, it shows that this series is actually helping you guys, and it's going to incentivize me to want to create more as we head towards Treasure Cup. I feel like it's really important to get as much information out there for all levels of play so everybody can have fun and enjoy this amazing game. But with that being said, guys, I am out. Stay tuned for more videos. Have a great one. Peace.